Somebody told me, a long time ago, that with great power comes... So, it's no secret that I haven't really been a huge fan of the MCU's version of Spider-Man. It's not like I hate him or anything, although it might seem like I do. I've just always felt like the character is missing some fundamental aspects from what makes the source material great and could be achieving a lot more than it currently is. And with Spider-Man No Way Home on the horizon, there's kind of a lot riding on this movie for a lot of reasons. Not only did Far From Home set up a pretty crazy cliffhanger with Peter's identity getting revealed, but also being the end of a trilogy, it's fair to expect a little bit of closure with Peter's current arc moving into the future of these movies. And then on top of that, we got this whole Spider-Versal scope, 6 villains, about 100 different leaks, and the fans are basically expecting this movie to be the second coming of Christ, or else they'll act like Tom Holland personally took a big fat dump on their front lawn. Expectations are through the roof, both realistic and unrealistic, and by the time the movie comes around, trying to make sense of things that it quote-unquote does wrong versus what it did different from what I wanted might be a little bit difficult after all this nonsense. So I think I'm just gonna have to lay all my cards out on the table, disregard basically every expectation that I might have, and go into this movie with the clearest, most tranquil, serenity now mindset I've ever gone into a movie with. And to do that, I think I just need to let loose and sort of expel all of those expectations and thoughts and wants and fears, and really just relieve myself of everything into a video so I can think more clearly of it all. Sort of like a pre-rewrite. So here's my hot, stinky dump of a video that is Fanboy Prewrites Spider-Man No Way Home. A lot of poop jokes in this video. This is real classy, some of my best work. But first, I've been pretty negative this whole video. The movie's not even out yet, I'm already kind of talking shit. So let's liven things up and play some bingo, baby! So there's 25 spots on a standard bingo card, including a free space. For a bingo card about a Spider-Man movie, the free space is pretty obvious. Spider-Man Twitter's gonna suck. No matter what happens in this movie, I think it's fair to assume that that website is gonna be a complete cesspool, and I recommend muting every possible keyword involving spiders and or men. I've split the other 24 bingo spots into predictions, things that I think are going to happen in this movie, my wants, things that I want to happen but might not be super realistic, but still possible, my fears, things that I really don't want this movie to do, and a wild card section of crazy possible things that the movie could throw at us so that if they happen, I can take all the credit and gloat about it. Because god damn it, I'm gonna gloat about it. But I guess there's no real place to start except at the beginning. I think that this movie, for all the massive scope and multiverse ending stakes that it's trying to be, for that to work, the beginning of this movie has to fully ground us in the lives of these characters, in particular Peter. Without that, nothing is going to matter on any level besides something superficial. So I think that the movie should start right after the events of Far From Home, after Peter's identity is revealed. We open with Spider-Man on the run from the law. Police cars and news helicopters and everyone in the city is chasing Peter down as he barrels across a set of rooftops. He tries to web swing away, but is all out of web fluid before he slips and falls down to the streets below. He lies on his back looking up at the sky as the police surround him before we cut to Peter bloodied and exhausted in an interrogation room. The police question him about London, but with everything he says to prove his innocence, they push it aside and throw 10 more reasons why they think he's guilty. Because cops are shitty like that. That's when we hear a voice. Peter Parker, stop talking. And Matt Murdock steps into the room. Now I know this isn't the most original take. Basically, everyone in the world wants something like that to happen, basically word for word. Peter Parker has been in the MCU for 5 years, and the one relationship that people have been dying to see has been the one between Spider-Man and Daredevil. Both because of how great it is in the comics, but also because we just miss Charlie Cox so very much. And now this is the perfect opportunity to bring him into Peter's story. I don't expect him to be in much or even suit up or anything, but just this inclusion would be really cool to see, and I honestly think that there's a really solid possibility of this happening. I'm not going to get into leaks with this video. I know basically everyone and their grandma knows all about the leaks from this movie, but I think talking about that kind of thing is kind of unfair to the people that want to go into this movie completely blind, aka my friend Brian. Brian, if you're watching, hey, how's it going? I love you. Also, with the sheer amount of leaks out there right now, there's really a strong chance that anything you see could be fake. So the only thing I'm going to trust 100% is what's been officially confirmed by the movie. It's really the only way to keep expectations realistic. Regarding the beginning though, it would honestly be really crazy if they picked up literally where Far From Home left off and just started with Spider-Man screaming, "Spider-Man's name is Peter Parker." What the fuck? Hashtag let Spider-Man say fuck. Anyway, with Peter dealing with the law, starting this movie in this more grounded fashion, we really need to see how this is going to affect the side characters. In these movies, characters like Ned, MJ, Flash, Betty, Happy, and even Aunt May have felt incredibly flat and uninteresting. Most of the time, they just seem to exist for marketing and lame jokes. Marissa Tomei is a fantastic actress, and she can absolutely play a grieving working-class widow from New York perfectly. Just look at King of Staten Island. That's a great movie, by the way. We love Pete Davidson. We're Pete Davidson house. But instead, she's just kind of used as a joke joke most of the time when she can be so much more. So essentially a main thing that I want from this movie is for the side characters to have character. And speaking of the side characters, call me a DC writer looking at fridges, because I really think it's time to kill one of those fuckers. I think that the death of one of these side characters would do a lot to push Peter out of this high school era and into some real adulthood. I don't think Aunt May should die. Like I said, she has a lot of potential to just be thrown away like that. It worked in the game for a lot of reasons that don't really apply here, and I just don't want to waste Marissa Tomei.
This is Marissa Tomei, Elaine, an Oscar winner!
But I think a character like Ned or Happy, they're kind of maxed out on what they can do with them, and they gotta fucking go. Because Ned's not gonna be Hobgoblin, let's be real. It's not happening. It's not happening because it didn't happen in the comics. It didn't happen. But there is something they could do at the start of this movie. Something to make this the greatest movie opening of all time. Honestly, any use of that music anywhere in this movie would be the best. Now, if it were up to me, this movie would stay within the confines of the more grounded and small-scale approach, focusing solely on Peter being on the run from both the law and some of his villains. I've always felt that Spider-Man Homecoming's biggest strength was its connection to the more human side of the character, and returning to those roots in a more serious way would be a really nice return to form. But it's clear that this movie is going to be pretty massive in scale. This is a little bit of a red flag for me, since that's very much the opposite of what I want. But I understand that sometimes as a creator, the studio steps in and forces you to make some big multiverse thing, regardless of what you initially wanted to do. Plus, I already made a video pitching a similar story way back when we thought Sony was going to take Spider-Man out of the MCU, and I don't want to repeat myself. So if I had to make a movie about the Spider-Verse following the events of Far From Home, this is what I'd like to see from it. So after Peter does his whole thing with Doctor Strange trying to restore his identity, the multiverse starts to crumble, a portal opens, and 3 figures step out. Andrew Garfield is Peter Parker, wearing a version of the symbiote suit, Gwen Stacy Spider-Gwen, played by Emma Stone, and an older Miles Morales Spider-Man, played by Donald Glover. It might as well be confirmed at this point that the movie is going to feature both Tobey Maguire's Raimi Spider-Man and Andrew Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man. Nothing's been officially said yet, and again, I don't want to get into leaks or anything, but the sheer amount of rumors and slip-ups from actors has basically had the surprise ruined from the start. They very well could pull another Ralph Bohner.
You're Ralph Bohner?
And just have Tobey and Andrew playing like pizza delivery guys or something, or have everything be an illusion by Mysterio or whatever. But I think with what this movie is doing for its villains, it'd be a pretty cheap move to pull for what feels like the 10th time, and it wouldn't really fit with what this movie's going for. So for now, even disregarding any leaks or rumors or anything, I think it's pretty safe to say that we're going to see Raimi and TASM Peter Parkers at least for a scene in this movie. But if I'm being honest, I think that way of handling the concept of the Spider-Verse is just kind of lame. In 2018, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse came out and told the world one very important thing. Anyone can wear the mask. Whether it be Miles Morales, Gwen Stacy, Penny Parker, Peter Porker, Miguel O'Hara, the role of Spider-Man is something that transcends the character of Peter Parker and lives on through countless different people as a concept and as an ideology. No matter who you are or what you look like, you can be Spider-Man and you can be a hero. And so to see that this movie will most likely only focus on 3 versions of Peter Parker, potentially all wearing very visually similar suits, that's honestly just boring. Of course, we don't know this for sure, and it will undoubtedly be really fun to allegedly see Tom, Tobey, and Andrew interact on screen together. Like, I'm sure they'll do some fun stuff with it. I can guarantee they'll make a joke about Tobey not having web shooters or something. But only having those 3 Spider-Men just reinforces the kind of dated idea that Peter Parker is the only Spider-Man. I know that's a really controversial take, and I know I'm going to get some hate for it, since there have been Spider-Verse stories that are only about versions of Peter Parker, but I just think that the character has evolved a lot since the 90s, and doing a Spider-Verse story without any other character than Peter Parker misses a lot of interesting potential. So if I were writing this movie and I was told that I had to make it a live-action Spider-Verse, it would really need Gwen and Miles. They don't have to be a main focus, and the idea doesn't have to be the main theme or anything. I don't want this movie retreading over what Spider-Verse did, but at the very least, those 2 characters just existing in the movie can do so much to reinforce these modern and important ideas about the character that culturally a lot of fans have grown to accept and love. This movie is supposed to be a celebration of all things Spider-Man, after all. And I think that you can introduce these new characters in ways that are super fresh but still recognizable. Like this older version of Miles is something that we've never seen before, and it can finally give Donald Glover that opportunity to play the character in live action, but we do recognize Donald Glover at least as an actor from Homecoming. Emma Stone as Spider-Gwen is a character that we recognize but don't really know this version yet. Andrew Garfield's Peter in the black suit is a character that we know but is in a dark place in his life that we haven't seen before. This gives us both that kind of fan servicey element that this movie wants to capitalize on, but also has a lot of room for some really interesting potential for these characters. Like, I think it'd be really interesting if throughout the movie, Andrew tries to reconnect with this Gwen who lost her version of Peter, and we learn that in his universe, in the TASM universe, the symbiote took advantage of his pain and his anguish over her death, and throughout the movie, he stops mourning her and is finally able to rip it off and move on. It's interactions like that which don't need a huge amount of explanation, but can do so much for the characters, even just as supporting roles. I don't really expect them to do this, but honestly, just the inclusion of Miles would go a long way here. It would also be really crazy if at the end they did this like peer into the multiverse thing where they show clips from the animated stuff and even the game too. Notice how I haven't mentioned Tobey yet in my pitch, don't worry, I'm gonna get to it. Ideally, with that team of spider people, I, and Sony clearly, think it would also be really cool to see a version of the Sinister Six, only instead of villains from other Spider-Man movies, it would be one led by the MCU's Mac Gargan. Homecoming set up Gargan as a force to be reckoned with, and I've always found it weird how that movie's credit scene has been completely forgotten about.
Wait.
He
He doesn't exist anymore, Troy. He's gone. He's in the Far Cry games.
Credit scene where he said if I found out who he was, I'd fucking kill him. Where did he go? As it stands right now, I'm not totally sold on what they're doing with the villains for this movie. Bringing the Sinister Six through the multiverse is an interesting concept, and I'm always happy to see Willem Dafoe come back as my boy Gabi. But so much about what they're doing is rubbing me kind of the wrong way. We're not entirely sure at what point in their lives these characters have been taken, meaning that a lot of them, specifically Sandman and Doc Ock, might have their redemption arcs muddied. It could have been interesting if they were all from universes where they beat their respective Spider-Mans, or there was no Spider-Man, maybe establish that those universes are destined to fail or destroy themselves, so the villain's motivation is to stay on this universe to survive. It also just kind of feels like sort of shallow fan service, just trying to appeal to the older fan bases by showing them stuff that they remember, regardless of the impact on the story as a whole. Oh well, we'll probably get some Raimi memes out of this at least. But my real concern is that these villains aren't going to have any emotional weight for this story. What's the reason that we love Alfred Molina as Doc Ock? 1,000 different reasons, honestly, let's be real. But the main one is the emotional connection that he has with his version of Peter Parker. The same goes for Norman Osborn and Sandman and even Electro and Lizard. When you take that away and turn Spider-Man into some teenager that they've never met, a lot of that personal connection is lost. I'm running out of Baja Blast. This is a problem. It does look like they're doing something interesting with the MCU Peter wanting to save them from their fates of dying against Spider-Man, even though Lizard and Sandman didn't die. Okay, well, maybe they'll explain that, I don't know. But from the villain's perspective, I'm having a hard time seeing any motivation beyond sheer pettiness from seeing a different version of someone that they hate, which is why I think a Sinister Six made up of Tom Holland's villains from the MCU would be a better fit for this movie. We can establish that after the 5-year time jump in Endgame, Mac Gargan, Vulture, Shocker, and Tinkerer served their sentences, and now that Peter's identity is exposed, they want to hunt him down. Maybe Vulture pretends to want revenge, but is really working as a double agent to protect Peter or something. And we can also introduce a couple new villains like Kraven or Rhino, or bring back Mysterio in some way like a robot or a projection or something, just to fill out the roster of villains that personally know this version of Spider-Man. So it'd be up to Peter and the other Spider people to defend himself against his loved ones. I think something like that would just be big enough in scale and fan servicey enough to draw in seats, but at the end of the day, the Spider-Verse and the villains are only used as a backdrop to a mainly personal and grounded story focusing on Peter. Hell, you can even establish Oscorp as a company through that, and finally have some villains that aren't directly related to Tony Stark. I swear, if Tony's treated with the same amount of weight that it has in the last movies, either with his legacy or his tech being a MacGuffin or something, I think I'm gonna explode. What would be super crazy though, obviously this isn't gonna be the case after that second trailer, but with all the marketing showing off that bridge, I think it would be really cool if, no joke, the movie took place exclusively on the bridge. I'd call it Spider-Man No Way Home off that fucking bridge. Peter is trapped on the bridge for 24 hours and is forced to team up with the other Spider people to defend it for a whole night as the Sinister Six launches waves of attacks. They would sit at makeshift campfires and talk about their respective lives through flashbacks until they get jumped by Goblin or Scorpion or somebody. The bridge could get more and more damage with every battle until it's just rubble by the end of the final fight, which would keep the story grounded in this very big scope of an idea that is Spider-Verse. Again, I don't see that happening, but I think that could be really interesting. Alright, let's pull back on the villains and the Spider-Verse stuff for a second and talk about the most important character in this movie. Bonesaw McGraw, baby!
Bonesaw is ready!
I want to talk about Peter's character a little bit, because that has always been the sticking point for me with these movies. But I think that No Way Home, with the direction that it seems to be heading, has some real potential to turn that around and make me really enjoy this version of the character. Or it can do the exact opposite and be a total disaster. I've talked pretty extensively about Peter's arc in this movie regarding the Doctor Strange spell, and how it seems like he'll have a choice at the end of this movie about his identity. The most classic narrative structure is about a character wanting one thing and then realizing that the thing they wanted wasn't what they needed. The first trailer showed us that Peter wants to restore his identity, and the spell fails because he's unwilling to let people like Ned, MJ, and May forget that he's Spider-Man. This can go one of two ways. Either Peter realizes that he can't have both and fully restores his identity, including MJ, Ned, and May, using Doctor Strange's spell, which is the direction that I want them to go, or Peter realizes that trying to mess up his identity only leads to problems. So he holds a press conference, gets in front of a crowd of people, and says,
I am
Spider-Man.
Okay, maybe it wouldn't be that on the nose, but I do really think that there is a possibility of getting that kind of ending from this movie, which I'm really not into. Not only do I think Peter's secret identity is a huge part of his character, so losing that would just make him far less interesting, but also that opens up the door to, and I hate to say it, Parker Industries. Now, if you don't know, Parker Industries was a company that Peter Parker founded in the comics, or I guess Doc Ock founded it. It's kind of complicated. It's a whole thing. It's not a thing anymore. Basically, all you need to know was that Peter ran this company, was a billionaire for a while, and, well, there's a reason that it's never talked about again. The run was okay, it was fine, but it was kind of at odds with what a lot of people thought was special about Peter Parker, being that he's working class and relatable. I know I'm the billionaire guy, haha, good joke, whatever, but I genuinely think that this wouldn't be the right direction for these movies to go in, and I really hope they don't do it. This Peter is already so influenced by Tony Stark that going this one step and making him essentially even more like him would be kind of ridiculous. Now, normally I'd say that they wouldn't do something like that it doesn't make sense. But the Avengers Campus Land at Disney California Adventure has a Spider-Man ride, where the Prewrites show has Tom Holland and Peter Parker start up a company called Web, which is like a big tech company and stuff, very reminiscent of Parker Industries. Of course, it's just a theme park ride. That's probably not too much to read into. That stuff usually doesn't influence the movies, but there is a slight chance that Disney's gonna want some synergy between the movies and the theme parks. Who knows though, maybe they'll go all one more day and bring in Mephisto or some shit to steal Peter's marriage away, to restore his identity and save Aunt May's life. Also, on the topic of Peter, I didn't really know where to say this, but can we please get rid of the Iron Spider suit? It looks like Doc Ock destroys it in their fight and takes the nanites or whatever, which thank God, because that is by far the worst Spider-Man suit. The CGI never looks right, the colors are all over the place, Bulletproof Spider-Man is just weird in general, I'm not huge on the arms, and the nanites are just lame, like this shot.
You're not Peter Parker.
Wouldn't have been so much cooler if Doc Ock took off Peter's mask like it was a regular costume? Like, come on, just dramatic reasons. I only wear it in my profile picture because I got the suit cheap as hell and it's the only picture of myself that I don't hate. So yeah, fuck the Iron Spider suit. Anyway, to sum all this up, I really think that this movie is gonna end with Peter making this final choice about his identity, and hopefully making the right one. Cause boy, it would be a shitstorm if he didn't. But really, at the end of the day, there's one thing that this movie could do that would really end it all for me. One thing that would push me over the edge into having a complete nervous breakdown and going all white man with a neckbeard on a YouTube channel. They had better not fuck up Tobey. Or any of the Raimi characters, but Tobey is the most important. Again, it's all but confirmed that the other Spider-Man are at least going to make an appearance in this movie. My bet is them just being in the final act is like an on your left moment for the big battle, but I would really like them to get some moments of genuine character to shine and have some emotional depth. The only thing is, I don't really know if I trust these writers. It's nothing personal, nothing against the writers of this movie. I wouldn't trust William Shakespeare himself to handle writing for any Raimi characters. The only person who has proven he can handle these emotional, complex, and important characters is Sam Raimi himself. But since Sam is too busy working on his magnum opus, Doctor Strange 2: The Return of WandaVision from Disney+, it doesn't seem like he'll have the time to step in and write a few lines. The Raimi Spider-Man movies are incredibly important. If you don't like the movies, that's whatever, but that trilogy of films completely redefined the whole landscape of superhero media, and made the concept mainstream. Without them, there would be no MCU, there would be no Dark Knight trilogy, there wouldn't be any of that shit. To so many people, Tobey Maguire is Spider-Man. As far back as 2002, he was inspiring people like that. It's almost similar to Christopher Reeve in a way. The impact and legacy of this character in those films is immeasurable. And so because of that, I think Tobey's role in this movie should be limited to a small personal moment that doesn't risk ruining his impact. I'm gonna expose myself as a legit fucking nerd. Sort of akin to Tom Baker's role in the Doctor Who 50th anniversary, or more recently the Smallville cameo in Crisis on Infinite Earths. Just something small and simple to let us see our favorite characters again, existing in the story as the emotional push that the main character needs. So for this pitch of mine, I think I figured out a way to achieve something like that. Basically, after the climax of the movie, after beating Gargan and the Sinister Six, Peter is given that choice from Doctor Strange about his identity: to restore it and be alone, or keep himself public but put everyone he knows in danger. That night, he sits on a roof, thinking about his decision. Exterior, New York City, night. Peter Parker sits on a rooftop, exhausted. His face is bruised, his suit is torn, but he's victorious. With the Sinister Six gone, the Spider-Men and Woman went back to their own dimensions, and Strange even offered to clear Peter's identity, for real this time. The day is officially saved, but still Peter feels empty, alone. The most alone he's felt since... Hey, kiddo. Peter looks up to see a familiar face. His eyes calm and clear, his face weighed down by the pain of life, but still warm and inviting, like it's telling you to hold on for 1 second longer. Mind if I sit here a while? Peter is speechless. He's barely able to stutter out his next words. But you look just like... So I've been told. The man sits down next to Peter, hanging his feet off the skyline. I don't understand. What are you doing here? I used to come to this place when I was your age. Look out, soak in the view. It's quiet up here. It was nice for when something was bothering me. The man turns to look at Peter. Is something bothering you? Peter looks down at his feet over the hanging skyline to the street below. All this time, I've had someone there for me, to get me through it. Tony, Happy, May, Ned, MJ, and now I'm gonna lose that. I thought I could have it all. Be the hero, get the girl, but I can't. I tried to live both lives and the whole multiverse imploded. The more people that know who I am, the more people get hurt, and Peter clenches his fists. It's not fair. I don't want to be alone. The man pauses for a moment, as if he's thinking back to something he heard years ago. It seems for some reason he knows this pain all too well. I think sometimes we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most to do what's right. Peter is silent. The glowing sun starts to come up over the horizon. You know, somebody told me a long time ago that with great power comes... The man looks up to see tears in Peter's eyes. Great responsibility. He looks down and smiles. Yeah, you got it, kiddo. I'm proud of you. Peter looks down as tears swell up in his eyes and pour down his face. I just miss you so much. I haven't forgotten you. I never will. I never could. I just don't know how I'm supposed to do this alone. Peter looks up and the man is gone. Regardless, Peter knows what he has to do. He stands up, rising with the sun, puts on his mask. But you're always with me, aren't you? And Spider-Man swings off to do what's right. Like I said, I don't trust anyone's right for Tobey, not even myself, so I just ripped off lines from Spider-Man 2. But I think a scene like that, followed by some stuff with MJ or Aunt May, would work really well for Peter in his potential arc in this movie. Now, I know that Tobey playing Uncle Ben isn't the most original idea, but I think that's the right way to do it. The Flash did something similar with Barry's dad being played by the actor who played Barry in the 90s TV show, and then he went on to play Jake Garrick, which was really cool, and that was a really unique use of that casting that I really liked. I don't think any other big-name actor should play Ben besides Tobey either, since that would kind of distract from the impact if he was just randomly played by George Costanza.
How can I live the rest of my life knowing I could have been with Marissa Tomei?
A lot of Seinfeld references in this one. Either way, I really do think we need to see Uncle Ben in this movie. With how Ben has been treated in this series up to this point, to have him just be some guy or just a passing reference of him wouldn't really feel like enough. Because there's been no mention of him, there's build up to it at this point, intentional or not. So it kind of has to be a bigger moment, a real dramatic moment in flashback or in a vision or something where Ben puts his hand on a crying Peter and tells him, finally, after 5 long years, finally tells him, with great power.
Great power. Great power.
Great power. With great power comes great responsibility.
Gonna be real. I'm kind of just exhausted thinking about this movie. It's been over a year of leaks and rumors, and I'm mainly just tired. Because really, at the end of the day, there's one thing about this movie that's kind of obvious. Realistically, I'm probably not gonna like it. I'm of course going to go in with an open mind, that's the whole point of this video, but every aspect of this movie is just screaming red flags at me, especially red flags that start with the and end with Rise of Skywalker. That movie has a lot of problems, but one of them was how it tried to pull in fans by bringing back an old villain, ruining the weight of the character's death, and having a lot of fan servicey moments like it was trying to be the end game of Star Wars. This is giving me that same energy from everything that I've seen, and I'm just not into that. Of course, it's totally fine if I don't like it. These movies have proven that they're not really for me. I'm gonna go see it with an open mind, talk about my thoughts as much as I feel I need to, but I'm not gonna shit on anyone who does enjoy it or enjoys these movies. Opinions are opinions, media is subjective, and you don't always have to agree with every loser you see in front of a camera. But therein lies the problem. The fact that I have to say all of that, give that whole spiel about what is really the most basic, fundamental part of human decency, to try and minimize the toxicity that gets thrown my way, isn't that a little ridiculous? I just spent 83 words right there, spelling out for you all as if you're children that you don't have to agree with me about a Spider-Man movie. Doesn't it seem a little ridiculous that I felt like I had to do that? And that plenty of other creators, some of whom I'm friends with that get this shit so much worse than I ever could, have to do the same thing? Did it even really help? Regardless of what I'm saying now, there's a whole lot of you going to the comments or making your response videos to call me pretentious or a hack or whatever it is you want to call me. So honestly, I'm not gonna baby you guys anymore. I trust my audience to know basic human decency without needing it spelled out every 5 seconds. I feel like the entire reason you're all here, especially this far into this long ass video, isn't because of my silly green screen or my Baja Blast or anything, but because everything I say is my genuine, honest opinion. So if you can't trust that, because I'm too worried about backlash or toxicity, then what's the point? So when this movie comes out, love it or hate it, I'm gonna be my 100% genuine, honest self and talk about it as genuinely and honest as I possibly can. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go take a shit. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. This video's been a long time coming, but I wanted to make sure I was doing something different with it that wouldn't be totally irrelevant once the movie came out, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you wanted to play bingo along at home when the movie comes out, I'll put a link down in the description where you can make a card, either with my predictions or with your own. Let me know down in the comments what you're expecting from Spider-Man No Way Home. If you're going to talk leaks, be sure to put a solid spoiler warning beforehand for people who aren't into that kind of thing. I've also added stretch goals to my Patreon. For example, you might hate that little mustache I've got going on right now. I'm trying to transform into J. Jonah Jameson by the time the movie comes out, but if we reach enough patrons, then I'll shave that sucker right off. Also, I've got stretch goals for an Amazing Spider-Man 3 pitch and a Spider-Man 3 rewrite. So if those are videos you want, be sure to go to patreon.com/TroyBoyo17. If you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. If you're new here, I have a lot of really fun Spider-Man videos planned for December that you're not going to want to miss. Special thanks to Also the Sting, Cassidy Bond, Connor Langell, Iron Ninja, Jonah, Logan Triplet Films, Lord Korb, Quick Raz, Red Deads, Ryder Harrison, Spider-Storm, That One Doesn't Count, and Tyler Goodrich for being spectacular fanboys on my Patreon. This has been TroyBoyo17 coming at you live. Have a happy holidays, stay safe everybody, be responsible, and I'll see you around.